The fronts are arriving from the Atlantic. They're the cause of the cloudy and damp weather in western Scotland, and that weather will push into Northern Ireland, the rest of Scotland, as well as northern and western England and Wales through the night. With the cloud thickening and those outbreaks of rain arriving, it is a mild night in the north and the west. But in central and southeastern parts of England, 5 Celsius in many places, even a touch lower in some sheltered spots. So a chilly start for the Midlands, eastern England, but a bright start here. And we keep some sunny spells into the afternoon, although clouds will tend to build. Elsewhere, that mild but damp start for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some heavy rain for a time through the central belt and southern Scotland. Those heavy bursts of rain push into northern England, clearing Scotland and Northern Ireland. Brighter skies here, 13 or 14 Celsius. 17 Celsius in the southeast with some sunshine in the afternoon. But the cloudy zone in the middle, I think, will make it feel a bit cooler than the last couple of days, for example. That cloud bringing some heavy showers late afternoon, early evening through northern England, the Midlands, Wales. But those showers, as they push southeastwards, tend to peter out. And, well, by dawn on Thursday, looks like clear skies once again for many places. As a result, in the north in particular, it's going to be a chilly start to the day. Temperatures in some spots down below freezing. But a bright start for much of Scotland, northern England, the Midlands, Wales. I think some lingering cloud there in the east of England, but that also clears by around lunchtime. However, by this stage, outbreaks of rain are returning to the southwest. And those spells of rain will move across much of the country during the second half of Thursday. Windy and showery on Friday.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. This is Dan Wootton Tonight with me, Mark Dolan. A glimmer of hope for Liz Truss as the International Monetary Fund admits the mini-budget will help Britain become the fastest growing major economy this year.
IMF said today that actually the plan, the mini-budget, has increased the forecast for growth.
Good news. Who knew? So despite the best efforts of the media and experts up to their old tricks again, will this pave the way for a Truss comeback? I'll explore that in my digest next, before getting the thoughts of my superstar panel. We've got the former Daily Star editor. No, we don't. She's not here. Goodness gracious, let's get this right. It is, of course, Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson, author and journalist Rebecca Reid, and top political commentator and, if we're honest, national treasure Christine Hamilton. Where's Dawn? She's in the cupboard somewhere. OK, after the Chancellor gets a grilling in Parliament, have the left got Trussonomics all wrong? Ex-Director General of the British Chambers of Commerce and co-chair of Leave Means Leave, John Longworth, explains why austerity-hating Liberals should get behind the PM's economic reform. That's at 20. Is Tory backbiting a sign that after 12 years in power, the party has run out of steam? Former Tory MP Louise Minch, Margaret Thatcher's ex-advisor Niall Gardner and journalist Suzanne Evans argue that a stint in opposition could rejuvenate the Conservatives. That's not what I think, but that's their view. What's yours? I'll get your opinions in the clash at 9:20. And as Keir Starmer puts the party on an election footing, does Captain Hindsight have what it takes to be our next Prime Minister? Or are Labour celebrating victory too soon? That's our big debate at 10, and that's the big theme of my digest in just a couple of minutes. As Pfizer admit they did not test their COVID jab for transmission.
Regarding the question around did we know about stopping immunisation before it's entered the market? No.
Were we lied to about the vaccine all along? I've got the perfect guest for this, a State of Fear author, Laura Dodsworth. She's live in the studio at 9:40. As Just Stop Oil's protests are branded unacceptable for blocking a fire engine and an ambulance, do we need to get tougher on eco-activists before their actions cost innocent people their lives? Brendan O'Neill, tonight's outsider, will be unleashed at 10:50, and he's not pulling his punches. Plus, in the wake of World Mental Health Day this week, has mental health become an industry and tantamount to a religion? Or are we right to put so much focus on our well-being? What's sure to be a fascinating debate in our media buzz happens at 10:30. And I'll spell out why John Cleese had to come to GB News just to maintain free speech. We'll be joined by trigonometry star Konstantin Kissin, who also quit the comedy circuit after feeling that he was being silenced. That's uncancelled tonight at 10:30 and a John Cleese special. Now, I'll bring you tomorrow's papers throughout the show as well and crown tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass at 10:50. So a really, really busy show. This is Dan Wootton tonight. With me, Mark Dolan. Let's go. Just one thing, though. I'm a glass half full kind of person, and there's plenty to look forward to next year. After what will be a challenging winter, the economy is likely to pick up by spring. Global energy prices appear to be on a downward spiral, and whilst COVID cases will no doubt rise in the next few months, by next summer the pandemic will be firmly in the rear-view mirror, if it isn't already. And more good news. It's been announced today that we have a date for the coronation of our new King and Queen, Saturday, May the 6th. Absolutely wonderful news. With any luck, the weather will be good and we'll get a bank holiday with which to toast our new monarch. King Charles has been in training for this role for decades, with no better role model in history than his own mother, Elizabeth. Queen Camilla, an attractive, bright, good-humoured and discreet woman who had the toughest gig following Princess Diana, hasn't put a foot wrong since she and Charles married. She will serve Charles and the country very well indeed. Quite rightly, King Charles, reading the room and acknowledging that the country is going through tough economic times, will make the coronation a slimmed-down affair. But even a coronation on a budget, a Tesco value coronation, will be streets ahead of anything else the world has to offer. It will, quite literally, be majestic. We know how to put on a show. So set your dates for what will be the party of the year, Saturday, May the 6th, as we celebrate a new chapter for the monarchy and a new chapter for Britain. My digest coming up. They've written off Liz Truss far too soon. Then my superstar panel, author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, Conservative commentator, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, and writer and journalist Rebecca Reid. Lots to get through, but first, the news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you, and good evening to you. As you've been hearing, the King's coronation will take place on Saturday, May the 6th next year. King Charles III will be crowned alongside Camilla, Queen Consort, according to Buckingham Palace. The coronation will take place at Westminster Abbey, 8 months after the death of his mother, Her Majesty the Queen. The date also marks the birthday of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's son, Archie, who'll be turning 4 on the same day. More than 2,000 specially invited guests are set to fill the Abbey to witness the historic event. Other news today, and the Chancellor says he remains committed to measures set out in his recent mini-budget, despite further intervention from the Bank of England today. The central bank has been buying up more government debt again, having warned of additional risk to the UK's financial stability. Facing questions in the Commons, Kwasi Kwarteng described the current support for households and businesses as strong, but he refused calls from his own party to streamline spending on HS2 and Quangos and instead lower taxes for small businesses. Now, the Prime Minister says G7 leaders will not waver in their resolve to help Ukraine achieve peace. The comment comes after President Zelensky joined Liz Truss and other heads of state to discuss the recent series of Russian attacks on Ukraine. In a statement, the leaders condemned Moscow for targeting civilians and said it constituted war crimes. President Zelensky is calling for enough air defence capability to stop Russia.
The first point is defence support, an air shield for Ukraine. This is part of the security guarantees that are an element of our peace formula. When Ukraine receives a sufficient quantity of modern and effective air defence systems, the key element of Russia's terror, rocket strikes, will cease to work.
A British businessman has been arrested and charged with conspiring to violate sanctions imposed by the United States government on a Russian oligarch. The US Department of Justice says Graham Bonham Carter carried out more than £900,000 worth of illicit transactions to fund real estate properties for Oleg Deripaska's benefit. The Department of Justice in the States says they'll be seeking Mr. Bonham Carter's extradition. And one last story for you. The actress Angela Lansbury has died at the age of 96. She was perhaps best known for her long-running role as the amateur sleuth Jessica Fletcher in Murder, She Wrote, as well as the voice of Mrs. Potts in the animated movie Beauty and the Beast. Her family released a statement saying she died peacefully at her home in Los Angeles. She was just 5 days short of her 97th birthday. Angela Lansbury, who's died today. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Time now to get back to Mark Dolan, who's hosting Dan Wootton tonight.
Many thanks to the brilliant Polly Middlehurst, who returns in an hour's time. Like the pound sterling, it's my view that our new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, has been drastically undervalued in the last few weeks. The narrative most of the media would have you believe is that this little lady is out of her depth, with her vision for a low-tax, high-growth economy out of kilter with reality. She's been cast as a leader half her party don't like, with rumours Sunak supporters who won't bury the hatchet wanting her out by Christmas. Even Keir Starmer, the cervix-free leader of the opposition, the most mediocre and uninspiring Labour leader for decades, is measuring up red curtains for number 10. Within the media, all of the hatred and vitriol put on Boris, some of which was self-inflicted but not all, is now being heaped upon Liz Truss. Get Boris out has been replaced with Get Liz out. The kind of people saying she must go tells me she must stay. Most commentators and some in her own party would have you believe her position is not recoverable as the Tories lag behind in the polls. But not so fast. Good news, folks. It seems that our Chancellor was onto something in his mini-budget after all. Take a look.
IMF said today that actually the plan, the mini-budget, has increased the forecast for growth. And it's very clear where we stand on this. We've got pro-growth, pro-enterprise, pro-business Conservatives on one side and the anti-growth coalition on the other side, who want to tax more and want to commit us to low growth.
There you go. Just to reiterate, the International Monetary Fund has said Kwasi Kwarteng's tax-cutting mini-budget will help Britain to be the fastest-growing major economy this year. They say the UK expansion within the economy will be the very top of the G7. Now, they do flag inflation as a stubborn problem that won't go away anytime soon. But the plan to go for growth already looks to be bearing fruit. Following the kicking they gave the budget 2 weeks ago, the IMF have now conceded, and I quote, the fiscal package, in other words, the mini-budget, is expected to lift growth somewhat above the forecast in the near term. Plus, the cost of wholesale energy prices continues to tumble as countries look beyond Russia for oil and gas, which means government support for household energy bills will likely cost considerably less than the $60 billion originally earmarked. Meanwhile, nominal UK wage growth was stronger than expected in the 3 months to August, and unemployment is down in the same period too. It's now 3.5%, another historic low. But the good news extends beyond the economy. It's being reported behind the scenes that Liz Truss, the most experienced member of the cabinet before she became PM, has accelerated efforts to amicably resolve the Northern Ireland Protocol, which divides our country down the middle, and to tackle illegal migrant crossings in the Channel, which are a humanitarian, economic and national security disaster. Margaret Thatcher famously stated, if you want something said, ask a man. If you want it done, ask a woman. And it's my view that Liz Truss will rise above the party squabbles, as Thatcher did in the early 80s with the Tory wets, who sought to thwart her important reforms. Liz Truss is no great performer, but judge her actions, not her words. Actions we saw when she stood up to Vladimir Putin when leading the Foreign Office, and actions we saw in the Trade Department when she negotiated all of those trade deals. She's going to roll her sleeves up, she's going to get down to work, and she will get things done. The mini-budget was a failure of political and economic communication, but not a failure of policy. Take my word for it, that budget is going to age better than Sophia Loren. As I said just 2 weeks ago, backed up by the architect of Trussonomics, Professor Patrick Minford, on this very show, those bold tax cuts will likely help Britain avoid a deep recession, as countries like America and Germany sink further into the red. As the economist Julian Jessup points out, projections for Germany from their very own Deutsche Bank right now are dire, with Britain avoiding recession and Germany going the other way, with a potential contraction of 3 or 4% in their economy, minus 3 or 4%. But we're the sick man of Europe, are we? Do me a favour. Bounce back Britain, here we come, thanks to a courageous budget, a bold policy platform, and at last a Prime Minister with a pair of balls. If Liz Truss sorts the economy, sorts the migrant crossings, resolves the Northern Ireland Protocol, and taps into the potential of Brexit, for example, signing that massive trade deal with India, and with more to come, she will reverse that poll lead. Labour's current popularity is in fact a headache for Keir Starmer, as voters will now scrutinise all of his actions and all of his policies. And it's my view that with expensive state-run projects like a national energy company pumping taxpayers' billions into flaky renewables, I don't believe that Labour or Starmer will stand up to that scrutiny. The markets don't know it yet. Her party don't know it yet. And the public don't know it yet. But if I were you, I'd buy a few shares in Liz Truss. If she keeps with her vision and stands her ground, she'll prove everyone wrong, and she'll go from zero to hero. They say a week is a long time in politics. Well, 5 minutes is a long time these days. So she's got time. And Liz Truss, she does love a hard hat, doesn't she? Take a look at this. Very fetching. Look at that. Getting things done. Well, she's got 2 years to don that hard hat and fix Britain. Liz the Builder, can she fix it? Liz the Builder, yes, she can. What's your view? Dan at gbnews.uk. I believe that this woman has been written off far too prematurely, and I believe that that mini-budget will age well, which I said at the time. A failure of communication, not of policy. But let me know your thoughts, and let's get the views now of my superstar panel. Author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, Conservative commentator and GB News star, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, and writer and journalist Rebecca Reid. Rebecca, let me start with you. It's time to give this woman a fair crack of the whip, isn't it?
I think she's had a fairly fair crack at the whip. She had all that lovely Queen morning time where she got to go and have quiet thinking, which most Prime Ministers don't get. The budget, the one thing you didn't mention was that they had to do quite a big U-turn about one of the quite big things in the budget. Now, I'm willing to accept that it is good when a government realises they've done something wrong and they are willing to say, oh, God, OK, we'll course correct. I will respect that. But I think to be able to get any pride from a budget that you had to redo within days because the IMF were like, guys, no, it's not a great start, is it?
Well, scrapping that top rate tax was a colossal mistake. Because
but
depending
on
which economist you ask, it was either going to cost £2 billion a year or nothing, potentially even bring money in because it would attract wealthy people to come to this country and attract other people already here to go up a pay grade because they're not afraid of being clobbered by HMRC.
I don't think that there are many people who think I don't want to go up a pay grade because I'm going to get clobbered. And bear in mind, you only start paying it on that money that is above that threshold. So it's not like you suddenly pay 60% tax on all the money you earn, which is what I originally thought happened, which did seem unfair.
Well, there is some evidence that employers will discourage their staff from going above that threshold because of the hike.
I mean, there are so many other reasons you wouldn't go above that threshold. You don't get any child benefit if you go over a certain amount. You don't get any... Your nursery free hours are halved. There are various different things that are much more penalising, and people still do it. But then my main concern is that there are other auxiliary things, not the budget, that she's done, which are really distressing. My big one is that they've got rid of no-fault evictions, which is one of the leading causes of homelessness. So I don't think she's nailing it at all. I'm disappointed.
The no-fault evictions, that only came in during the pandemic, though, didn't it? We're out of the pandemic now.
But she's got rid of them, and they were helping to prevent homelessness.
But they were an emergency measure during the pandemic, which is no longer with us.
But it was preventing people from losing their homes.
But under the circumstances of furlough and people being made unemployed and businesses shut down, we're out of lockdown. It was a temporary measure and a measure that long-term could be very damaging for landlords.
I really don't care if landlords get damaged. In fact, the more damaged landlords are, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
They do provide homes for a lot of people.
But they wouldn't have to if people didn't own lots of homes. I personally think you should only be able to own one home, maybe two, because cottages are nice. But other than that, I'm saying 2 homes maximum per person. OK, well, Calvin Robinson, I think this Prime Minister deserves a crack of the whip, and I believe that she's already on the right side of history, and it's only about 2 weeks since that mini-budget. The IMF having to reluctantly concede that this pursuit of growth is going to pay dividends. It will keep us out of recession, whilst Germany goes into a deep one.
But then I agree with you. She shouldn't have U-turned. She should have stuck to it. And if she says the lady is not for turning and then she turns, it kind of undermines her argument, doesn't it? What I'm most concerned about right now, though, Mark, is she's at the EPC in Europe right now. She's about to sign the PESCO deal, the permanent structured cooperation deal with Europe, which could lead to the slippery slope towards a European army. I don't think we should have anything to do with that. This is part of the reason we left the EU.
Yeah, no, I think that is a concern. However, the commentators have got it in for Liz Truss in the way that they did for Boris Johnson. They seem to have replaced Boris with Liz.
Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, the kind of people that are calling for her to go make me think she must stay.
Well, this is because the mainstream media and the lefty liberals in Westminster all want to control the government. They can't control the Tory government, so they want to get Keir Starmer in there. So they want to get the Tories out at all costs, not necessarily Boris or Liz, but the Tories must go in their eyes.
Well, I think with Liz Truss, with this bold plan for growth and a small state and low taxes and high growth, I think this is possibly the last opportunity for Britain to change, a proper change in the way our economy runs, perhaps for a generation.
It's a good start. The neoliberal focus on economics is a good start, but we need a conservative who's going to focus on socially conservative issues, such as immigration, such as promoting the family. If she could do that as well as looking at growth, then amazing.
Quite hard for her to promote the family, though, because her track record's not stellar.
A little bumpy. Here's the thing, Christine. I'm hearing good noises about what's happening behind the scenes, Northern Ireland Protocol, a more emollient relationship with the EU in terms of getting that one resolved. Also, the migrant crossings, she knows that's a game changer. If she can get that fixed, I think she's won the next election.
If she can do all that, yeah. I mean, she has had a very rocky start, and you said about her PR presentation was pretty disastrous, and yes, it was. Of course, she shouldn't have U-turned on the top rate of tax, but she shouldn't have done it in the first place because it wasn't going to come in until April. So why...
Announced it too early.
Announced it far too early. But, you know, she's an indomitable, determined woman. She has great self-belief and she has the will to win. She believes in her policy. She's the first Tory Prime Minister we've had since Margaret Thatcher, frankly. I mean, if you look at going backwards, you know, Boris and May, etc., whoever they were. So I think she can turn it around. She's got an awful lot against her, the mainstream media for a start, but she's also got against her, she's got a lot of her own troops on the back benches, and she hasn't helped herself by not... First of all, she sacked from the cabinet all the Rishi supporters, which was a mistake. I mean, she should have kept some of them. So she's got a whole raft of people on the back benches now, disaffected, disillusioned, who want to have a go at her. I mean, would somebody please shoot Michael Gove while we're at it?
Now, I know you won't mean that metaphorically.
Oh, I mean it metaphorically.
Really, let's not.
Of course I mean it metaphorically.
You'll feel so bad if someone does, Christine.
Do we really have... I suppose we do have to explain that, yes. OK, but you know what I mean.
Don't worry, you don't get cancelled on this show.
She has to, you know, you have to... All the nautical metaphors, she has to keep a firm hand on the tiller, she has to keep the recalcitrant crew, you know, locked up below decks, battle the winds, etc. But no, she's got all the right attitudes, all the right views. So going for growth is absolutely what we
Christine,
have.
Going for growth means importing more immigrants to take more jobs.
Well, I hope we covered that by saying that she's got to crack the immigration, she's got to crack the Northern Ireland Protocol, etc., etc. I mean, she's got so much on her.
I think if she can deal with the illegal crossings, I think the public will accept some level of skills-based migration, which, of course, was the promise of Brexit. Briefly, Rebecca?
I think if she were going to do anything short-term, all of those things take a long time. Working on her oratory would be really important. She is a terrible public speaker and she's not charismatic. If she can lick that, it would really help.
I love her terrible public speaking because I think we've had the sort of permatan polish of Tony Blair. We've had the kind of Oscar Wilde lyricism of Boris Johnson.
That's generous.
I like...
They get the turgid delivery of style if we're not careful.
I think that she's real. I think she's straight. I think her weakness will be her strength. I think she's going to go from zero to hero. I think it's time to buy shares in Liz Truss. Wow. Very, very briefly, I will get in trouble with Caroline. Final question. You wrote... First of all, you've had your highs and lows in your life.
Indeed.
Bankruptcy, public disgrace, and then back at the top. You wrote a book called The Book of British Battle Axes. You wrote about Queen Victoria and Margaret Thatcher and Boadicea, right?
All of them.
Has she got what it takes? Can she find that sort of that courage and that strength?
She has.
Can she be a great Prime Minister?
She is certainly a battle axe. She has an inner steel, and she's certainly got, you said it, she's got balls.
There you go. Well, she's not the only one, of course. Present company accepted. What do you think, Dan, at gbnews.uk? Coming up, as Pfizer admit they did not test their COVID jab for transmission, were we lied to about the vaccine all along? A State of Fear author, Laura Dodsworth, joins me at 9:40. She's not pulling her punches. But first, does the infighting within the Tory party show that after 12 years in power, the Tories are running out of steam? Have they got mental fatigue? Are they tired of power? Former Conservative MP Louise Mensch, Margaret Thatcher's ex-advisor Niall Gardner and journalist Suzanne Evans go head-to-head in the clash. Let me know what you think. Email Dan at gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. There's a poll as well. The results after the break.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie's. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Lots to come, including big news about John Cleese coming to GB News. More reaction from a top comedian later in the show, but time now for The Clash. In spite of a highly successful conference speech from Liz Truss, I thought it was brilliant, the infighting continues among the Conservative Party. A former minister who backed Rishi Sunak in the leadership contest told the Independent newspaper today that if Truss introduces public spending cuts, she'll have, quote, won the leadership on a false prospectus. And even those in the Truss corner are losing faith, with one miserable cabinet minister telling the Telegraph's Christopher Hope, we've just run out of steam. With the party locked in civil war and comments like that emerging from the cabinet, you've got to wonder if the Tories even want to be in power. After all, they've lasted in government for over a decade with no serious opposition from Labour until now, whilst contending with an exhausting pandemic and now a global economic crisis. So, in a clash inspired by the words of that unnamed cabinet minister tonight, I'm asking, after 12 years in power, have the Tories run out of steam? Let me know your thoughts by emailing Dan at gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. We've got a poll running, so do vote in that. I'll give you the results shortly. But to debate this, I'm delighted to welcome political commentator Suzanne Evans, former aide to Margaret Thatcher, Niall Gardner, and former Conservative MP Louise Mensch. Louise, great to have you on the programme. Are the Tories tired of power?
I don't think so, but they're going to have to show us something very different. Earlier, you said that this mini-budget was courageous, and I was just reminded of Yes Minister and how Sir Humphrey Appleby, courageous was the most dangerous thing that a political policy could possibly be. And I think that's where we're at. You showed the charts of the growth and everything, and there's Great Britain at the top. Unfortunately, that part of the IMF prediction was taken before the mini budget, so it isn't coming from Kwasi Kwarteng's policies. Now, what they did say is that next year we might do a little bit better than the 0.3% growth that they've otherwise predicted. But, swings and roundabouts, they warned of inflation. So what most people are asking, if Liz is the battle axe that Christine Hamilton suggests that she is, and we all hope that she is, she needs to swing it and she needs to metaphorically take off the head of the Chancellor and replace him with somebody sensible like Jacob Rees-Mogg. Today we had another intervention from the Bank of England, and what voters are looking for from the Tories is sensible policies. They're not looking for mad socialist policies where the IMF stepped in. We're used to the IMF stepping in for the Labour Party. For those of us of a certain age who can remember that sort of thing. It doesn't look calm, it doesn't look collected, it looks chaotic. Liz got a great cabinet, and then she didn't even talk to them about this budget. If she's really going to lead, she needs to take the truly big decision and replace Kwasi with somebody else who'd be very good, who's a businessman who knows the markets. I mean, obviously, Jacob is a friend of mine. I think he would be brilliant, but she's got other choices. And I think she also needs to sack Suella Braverman, who is chuntering as Home Secretary, which is a job I think she's over-promoted for. She could get rid of her. Put a Rishi Sunak loyalist in that key great office of state and begin to build bridges so that you've got a working team and less backbiting.
You're right to mention that the IMF have countered the good news about growth next year as a result of the mini-budget with inflation. But inflation is better than a recession. And you, Louise, a former very high-profile Conservative MP, arguing there against low tax, a small state, or a tough line on immigration, which is what Suella Braverman wants to achieve. When did the Conservatives stop being conservative?
Well, you see, I think I am actually carrying the true Thatcherite banner. Before Margaret Thatcher went for growth, what was the number one thing she did before she did anything else? She got a grip on inflation. That was the absolute first thing that she did. With runaway inflation, you cannot have a sound and stable economy. And as for getting a grip on immigration, we want to get a grip on these channel crossings and illegal immigration. But the Conservatives are not a protectionist party, never have been. Adam Smith, we're for free trade. I was obviously a gigantic Brexit supporter. And what we said was we want to get rid of the preference from the EU and bring in the best and the brightest from all around the world. That is a part of growth. There's nothing wrong with bringing in the best people, the most attractive people from Australia, New Zealand, wherever it might be, Singapore. We don't give priority to the EU anymore, and we don't have open borders. That doesn't mean that we don't want those doctors, those nurses, those engineers, those computer programmers. We absolutely do want them. And if Suella has got a problem with that, then frankly, again, she should go, and we should bring in somebody from Rishi's team so that we're all working together and singing from the same hymn sheet.
Niall Gardner, I'm a big fan of, but she's in New York now, and I think she's gone a bit woke. Can you tell us what you think Margaret Thatcher would make of Liz Truss and make of the mini budget? Because I think she would back both.
Thanks very much for having me on the show today, and it's great to also be on the show together with Suzanne and Louise as well. I have to disagree with Louise, I think, on several of her points. In my view, I do think that Lady Thatcher would be broadly supportive of the overall approach being taken by Liz Truss. She would have supported, I think, the tax cuts being put in place. She would have opposed the planned rise in corporation tax. I do think that Liz Truss is instinctively a Thatcherite politician. And in many respects, she is advancing the kind of policies that promote economic freedom that Margaret Thatcher would have strongly supported. I do think the U-turn on the top rate tax was a mistake by Liz Truss. And I hope that we won't see any further U-turns. But broadly speaking, if you look at the mini budget that was unveiled, I think this is a sound budget. You have here in the United States some Reagan economists who have supported it significantly. I do think that the Conservative Party has to go for a pro-growth, low-tax set of policies here to kickstart the British economy and do exactly the opposite, of course, of what Joe Biden's doing here in the United States. Biden's spending trillions of dollars. He is really wrecking the US economy, which is heading for a recession next year. And I do think that Liz Truss is going about things in a very different way, advancing economic freedom, which at the end of the day really is the recipe, I think, for long-term economic success. So I do think Truss deserves a lot of credit for her overall approach. This is the right way to do things. Let's cut taxes. Let's make Britain more competitive, and certainly let's encourage more foreign direct investment into the United Kingdom at this time.
Niall Gardner, briefly, if you can, in terms of whether the government have run out of steam, it was very clear that Gordon Brown's Labour administration ran out of steam, as did John Major's. So do you think this is a government showing signs of metal fatigue, that the hunger for power, the appetite to rule is gone? Perhaps the Tories could benefit from a decade in the wilderness?
I don't think actually Britain would benefit at all from a decade in the wilderness, because I think you'd have a decade of socialist misrule. And Britain would be on its knees, probably begging the IMF for a loan, actually, under a Labour government. So I think that's the last thing we want. I do think with Liz Truss that we have regeneration in Britain. You have a Prime Minister who is adopting real conservative policies here. After a decade of conservative rule where successive conservative prime ministers have not exactly implemented conservative economic policies. So I think this is the right approach. The government has not run out of steam. And also, in her defence, I would say that Suella Braverman actually has been, so far, in my view, a very good Home Secretary. I heard her speak in Birmingham last week. She's very sound. She's launching a war against the woke culture, which I think is badly needed, frankly, to defeat the woke left And so I think the last thing we need is a Rishi Sunak supporter coming in replacing Suella as Home Secretary. I think she'll be a very successful Home Secretary. She has, though, got to deal with the migrant crisis. She's got to rein this in. You can't have large numbers of illegal migrants crossing the channel into the UK. This has to be dealt with.
Oh, absolutely right. Suzanne Evans, good to see you. Welcome to the show. What's your thought on this? Do you think the government have run out of steam, run out of ideas? Do they still have an appetite for power?
I think they have run out of steam, yes. But let's be honest, I'm not really sure the Conservative administration, albeit with the Lib Dems in coalition from 2010, actually got up ahead of steam to start with. I think I'm looking back over the past decade or so, and I'm seeing really continuity Labour right from the word go. The successive Conservative leaders and what we've had for now in the past 7 years, none of them, until Liz Truss has come along, has actually tackled issues that are traditionally Conservative, like low taxation. We've still got the highest tax burden for 70 years. Neither David Cameron, Boris Johnson or Theresa May did anything to tackle that. Neither did they do anything to tackle immigration. They didn't, and Neil's already alluded to this, they continued to allow wokery and political correctness to run rampant through the public sector and the civil service. Nothing was done about that at all. Very little reform on benefits, absolutely no reform of the behemoth, out of control NHS, inefficient spending and waste. Nothing was done to tackle that. And I think here we have in Liz Truss something that is potentially very, very different and very, very brave. A proper Conservative Thatcherite Prime Minister for the first time this century. And I think that's really something that's very good. And Mark, you said yourself earlier, I thought you made a very, very pertinent point. You said that there was nothing wrong with the policy of the mini budget. It was the political and economic communication that was wrong. And I totally agree with that. And I think it's really quite unfortunate that the mini budget was so dramatic so early on in Liz Truss's reign, as it were. She obviously wanted to try and make an impression, and I don't blame her for that. But perhaps she would have benefited from playing her cards a little bit closer to her chest and taking things a little bit more slowly. We knew from her leadership campaign that she was all about free markets, low taxation, personal freedom. And it was great to hear that reiterated again in her speech of conference. But sometimes, particularly in these days when markets, they're not just jittery now, they've been jittery since it fell off the cliff in March 2020 when the country went into lockdown. The city's been on edge since then. This is nothing new, really. I just think she should have played a little bit more cautiously right at the beginning.
Louise Mensch, last word goes to you, briefly if you can.
Look, you just are swimming against the tide of the facts. You can say that Joe Biden's crashing the economy. Well, look how the dollar is doing against the pound. Last time I checked, we were $1.10 to the pound. People are not going to invest in Britain if they believe that their investment that's paid for in pounds is going to sink through the floor in the exchange rates. The first time a pension fund goes down, you're going to have a run on the banks. Now, am I being unconservative? I don't think I am, because I don't want 12 years of Labour government. And we are literally in danger. We can go la, 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 can't hear you, to the polls, but they are 30 points ahead. This isn't working. A good Conservative is a factual Conservative, and they tap their sails to the wind. They take facts into account. Can Liz recover? Absolutely. She's got time. But she also has to make some changes. She has to show us that she is the leader that she wants to be and that we voted for.
Louise Mensch, great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us from the Big Apple. Also live from Washington, Niall Gardner, Margaret Thatcher's former personal aide, and political commentator and ex-politician Suzanne Evans. Great to see all three of you. A fascinating debate. Well, what do you think? After 12 years in power, have the Tories run out of steam? Ian on Twitter says they sure have, but the bigger problem is that Labour have neither the power nor the steam to be any better. Way too much of a diversity party instead of being a real party of opposition. Paul on Twitter says seems to be a constant theme with any political party where they promise lots of things but never deliver. In the north, we're still waiting for this so-called levelling up. Skillen on Twitter says they never had steam. They're a bunch of liberals and not true conservatives. Well, the votes are in now. 61% believe that the Tories have run out of steam. 39% say they are still going strong. Keep those opinions coming down at gbnews.uk. Coming up, as Just Stop Oil's protests reach new lows by blocking a fire engine and an ambulance. Do we need to get tougher on eco-activists? The French have taken some very drastic treatment. I'll show you what they've been up to next with Brendan O'Neill, who's with us in just a few minutes. Also coming up, were we lied to about the vaccine after all? State of Fear author Laura Dodsworth joins me to break down Pfizer's shock revelation that they did not test the COVID jab for transmission. So the idea that you get the jab to save granny was a big fat lie, or at least seems to be so. We'll discuss that in 2 minutes.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie's. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Lots to discuss in the next hour and 20 minutes. Now, the pressure to get vaccinated was immeasurable. Millions of Brits and billions worldwide were told they had to get jabbed to, quote, save granny, even if their own age and health profile meant that they did not need to take the needle. Getting vaccinated would stop transmission of the disease, they said. Not doing so made you selfish, a crackpot, and even a granny killer. That's what they said. Well, all of that coercion may have been for naught. Yesterday, Dutch MEP Rob Roos quizzed Pfizer in the European Parliament on whether their COVID jabs were tested for stopping transmission before they were unleashed on the public. Here is the shocking exchange.
Was the Pfizer COVID vaccine tested on stopping the transmission of the virus before it entered the market?
Regarding the question around, did we know about stopping immunisation before it's entered the market? No. We had to really move at the speed of science to really understand what is taking place in the market.
This is scandalous. Millions of people worldwide felt forced to get vaccinated because of the myth that you do it for others. Now, this turned out to be a cheap lie.
Well, if Pfizer knew the vaccines were not tested for transmission, in other words, giving other people the disease, why the chilling, unforgivable assault on bodily autonomy? Pfizer did not respond to our approach for comment, so they couldn't answer that question. Various subsequent studies have suggested vaccines can reduce COVID transmission somewhat, although the FDA in the US admits, quote, the scientific community does not yet know if the Pfizer vaccine will reduce such transmission. Laura Dodsworth is the brains behind the brilliant book A State of Fear, How the UK Government Weaponised Fear During the COVID pandemic, and she joins me now. Hi.
Hello.
It's good to see you. So we were sold, in terms of the vaccines, on the idea that you take it in order to sort of stop other people getting COVID and dying. Based upon the answer from this Pfizer official, that was a lie.
It was, but the thing is, Mark, it's as though people had their fingers in their ears and they just didn't want to hear it, because the fact is that information was in the trial data. Peter Doshi wrote an article about it in BMJ at the time. I looked at the trial data.
And Peter Doshi is he's a top medic, isn't he?
Yeah, and writes for
BMJ?
Writes for BMJ, yeah. So the thing is, the trials for the COVID vaccines were to test the reduction of severity of one or more symptoms. They didn't test reduction in hospitalisation, death or transmission. And yet we have been told that the vaccines would reduce or stop transmission. You know, President Biden said so in the US. Yeah. Sajid Javid here, when mandates were being rolled out for care home workers, literally said, get a job, get a jab or get a new job. And, you know, the whole premise behind that was that care home workers should be vaccinated in order to protect vulnerable and elderly people in care homes. But there was never any evidence, not any good hard evidence, that the vaccines would reduce transmission. They might do if they reduced your symptoms, if they made you less symptomatic, because therefore you would, you know, cough and sneeze less. But the fact that it was used in order to coerce people and incentivise people into being vaccinated was totally consistent with the whole unprecedented behavioural science approach to the vaccines, and in fact to the whole pandemic.
Well, and the issue is that if this vaccine was 100% harmless, then perhaps it's worth a roll of the dice. Perhaps if it reduces transmission by a tiny amount, that's better than nothing, kind of marginal gain. But the bottom line is that we vaccinated millions of people around the world that statistically did not need the jab, including children and young people. And this is a vaccine that, while largely safe, is injuring and killing some people.
Well, every vaccine is going to have adverse effects. I'm going to just roll back slightly, because I think that harm is only one decision, only one factor in people's decisions. You've got to remember, some people refused the vaccine for religious grounds or reasons of conscience. Some people didn't want it because they'd had COVID already, so they assumed they had some good level of immunity. You know, people have lots of reasons not to want to be vaccinated, and they should all be respected, and they're all private. In fact, I'm just going to say something. It's interesting to be talking about the vaccine right here with you now, because the last time I talked about the vaccine on GBNews, I was asked live on air if I was vaccinated.
On this channel?
And I'm afraid it was on this very channel, and I was so stunned and flummoxed to be asked that I started...
I haven't asked for any of your medical details.
You haven't asked for any of my
But that's because you're a picture of health, so I'm not worried.
Medical details, well done. But, you know, we're in this very strange situation right now where, over in California, the home of entertainment, Marvel Comics has been sponsored by Pfizer, and they've produced a comic called Everyday Heroes, which is to encourage people to get their jabs and their boosters. Over on the other side of the country, in Florida, the Florida State Surgeon General has...
Which is the chief medic in one of the great states of America.
Absolutely. Has produced some robust research to show that the risk of cardiac problems and cardiac death increases in men who are aged 18 to 39. So not only do they now not recommend it for under 17-year-olds, but they don't recommend the vaccine for 18 to 39-year-olds. So I think, you know, for a lot of us in the world, this is a really confusing time. You've got Disney and Marvel, this huge brand, saying, get vaccinated. And then other side of the country, you've got a highly respected medic responsible for healthcare in a whole state saying, we don't recommend it for whole swathes of people. It's really hard for people to know what to do.
Indeed, and then we saw a study from the University of Oxford. Are you familiar with that particular educational outlet? Have you heard of the University of Oxford?
Yeah.
And the Lancet magazine?
Educational establishment, I
So
believe.
the University of Oxford, Lancet magazine, which is one of the most revered medical journals on the planet, published a study that suggested that you're over 40% more likely to get COVID if you've had a booster. Now, the bottom line is lots of people will continue to get boosted, and it's a free country and all of that. But you see these sorts of statistics, the myocarditis, the incidence of people being vaccinated and getting COVID. And now countries like Denmark cancelling boosters for anyone under 50. You can't get the booster in Denmark now. You need a doctor's note if you're under 50. In Norway, it's under 65s. Is the vaccine house of cards beginning to tumble?
I think we're going to see some serious backpedalling. not least from people who were extremely hard on the refuseniks, as they called them. In this country, we can't forget Andrew Neil, Piers Morgan, Karen Brady and McAvoy, lots of them with their big headlines saying it's time to punish the unvaccinated, etc. There's going to be a lot of backpedalling in those quarters. Also, I think the behavioural scientists and the health authorities who incentivised and pushed people to get vaccinated might have egg on their face in due course if people don't believe in the efficacy as much anymore. You know, if it doesn't live up to the promises at the least, and of course, every adverse effect is going to worry people. I think Marvel and Disney have been astonishingly brave with their brand, to be honest. To sell their superheroes to Pfizer to presumably make money, because I think every adverse event is going to be, it's going to puncture the allure of the superheroes like a needle through a cape.
A day of reckoning is coming, isn't it?
Perhaps.
Yeah,
I think it already has come for trust in health authorities. That day of reckoning is here.
For sure. Your book is incredible, A State of Fear. There's another one on the way.
There is. New book next year. Can't tell you about that yet, though.
That will be a required reading, and you're always required listening. I won't ask you about your vaccine status. You look marvellous. Many thanks to Laura Dodsworth. A State of Fear is out now, and it is a must-read about all of the controlling mental techniques used during the pandemic. Now, coming up, as Sir Keir Starmer puts Labour on an election footing, that's right, they think they've already won, folks. Is the party celebrating too soon? My superstar panel of Christine Hamilton, Calvin Robinson and Rebecca Reid will debate that. Are Labour going to win the next election? We'll discuss that at 10. But first, as Just Stop Oil's protests reach new lows in blocking a fire engine and an ambulance, do we need to get tougher on eco-activists? Should we do what the French do, which I'll be honest is pretty brutal, pretty violent? I'll show you the video shortly. In fact, I'll see you in 2.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
It's Mark Dolan in for Dan Wootton. Lovely to have your company. I'm here tomorrow as well. Tomorrow's front page is coming up, but first, Brendan O'Neill is tonight's outsider. After another day of eco-idiocy where Just Stop Oil protesters blocked emergency vehicles, the government has weighed in, slamming their antics as unacceptable. Videos shared online show a fire engine and an ambulance on blue lights unable to get through traffic after 32 protesters blocked 3 roads in London. But despite the clear evidence, the group maintains supporters paused their roadblocks to let emergency services through. Lashing out at the despicable scenes, the Prime Minister's spokesman said they were toughening powers and granting further ones to police, adding these sorts of protests which disrupt people's daily lives or indeed can stop our emergency services from potentially saving lives are unacceptable. Tonight, Home Secretary Suella Braverman weighed in, branding their guerrilla tactics self-defeating and completely indefensible. Well, frankly, our coppers should follow the lead of the French police, who have been dealing with the eco-terrorists in a more firm manner. Take a look at this.
Ah, maman! Ah! 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 C'est super mal! Ah, t'es ouf! Ah! Ah! Faut arrêter le cinéma.
Couldn't happen to a nicer protester. Let's speak to Spiked Online's Brendan O'Neill, who never cries like a girl. Hello, Brendan.
Hi, Mark. How's it going?
Really, really good. Look, those scenes in France wouldn't be everyone's cup of tea, but you do feel like the current softly approach is only feeding the monster.
Absolutely. And I witnessed one of these protests in Shaftesbury Avenue on Sunday, and I was actually quite shocked by how soft the cops were. They were very much wearing kid gloves. They were trying to negotiate with the protesters rather than just dragging them off the street. And of course, the entirely predictable consequence is that ordinary people have now had to take things into their own hands. And as we saw today, lots of motorists and working class men and others have been dragging these protesters off the streets to make way for fire engines and ambulances and people who just want to get home. So if the state doesn't do what it's supposed to do, which is to keep the highways free of these kinds of nuisance people, then ordinary people are going to do it instead, I think.
Yeah, there can't be a hierarchy of causes, can there, Brendan? You can't say that it's all right to glue yourself to a road or a motorway because of global warming, but not child poverty or some other political issue. The way we resolve all issues is through the dispatch box, through the ballot box, through democracy.
Yeah, I keep thinking, just imagine if there were some right-wing campaign groups that were blocking roads all over London to make a point about immigration, for example, to say that we need less immigration. There would be no sympathy for them. I'm sure they would be dragged off by the cops. They would be demonized by the media. They would be called racists and scumbags, and the whole left would be cheering on as they were thrown into jail. So there is an extraordinary double standard. Because this kind of green ideology is quite favorable with the elites, these protesters are viewed in a much softer way. The way I see them is that they are a bunch of posh, deranged hippies who are causing a real problem for ordinary people. They are anti-modernity, anti-masses. They look with contempt upon ordinary people, and people have had enough of that. And that's why they're taking their own kind of action to clear the roads and so that they can go about their daily business.
Spiked Online is a daily must-read for anyone wanting a fascinating take on the day's big stories. And their chief political writer is Brendan O'Neill. Brendan, fabulous to have you on the show, and we'll see you in a week's time.
Thanks, Mark.
It's coming up to 10 o'clock. This is Dan Wootton Tonight with me, Mark Dolan. On tonight's show, as Liz Truss finally gets a glimmer of good news with the International Monetary Fund admitting the mini-budget will help Britain to become the fastest growing major economy this year.
IMF said today that actually the plan, the mini-budget, has increased the forecast for growth.
It's working, folks. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. So, was Trussonomics the dream policy for the anti-austerity left all along? Ex-Director General of the British Chambers of Commerce and co-chair of Leave Means Leave, John Longworth, a legend of a man, analyses and rates Kwasi Kwarteng's performance as he faced a parliamentary grilling today. Don't miss that at 10:20. One of the key architects of Liz Truss's economic policy, John Longworth. Now, as Keir Starmer puts the party on an election footing, are Labour celebrating victory too soon? Debating whether Captain Hindsight has what it takes to become PM, my superstar panel of Christine Hamilton, Calvin Robinson and Rebecca Reid will fight it out. Also, and I love this story, in the wake of World Mental Health Day, Has mental health become an industry and tantamount to a religion? Is it over the top now? Is it too much? Or are we right to put so much focus on our well-being? We'll debate that in the Media Buzz at 10:30. Plus, after the comedy legend John Cleese comes to GB News in pursuit of artistic freedom. That's right, John Cleese joins the presenting lineup at GB News. I'll speak to trigonometry Konstantin Kisin about why so many comedians feel there's no room for any people who want to be funny in the mainstream. He's a brilliant comedian in his own right. Konstantin Kisin on the brilliant John Cleese in Uncancelled at 10:40. Plus, the coronation of King Charles and Queen Camilla has been revealed, and we've got our date. It is the 6th of May, and I can't wait for it. It will be the party of the year. We'll get reaction to that as tomorrow's newspapers drop tomorrow's front pages in just a few minutes. And we'll be paying tribute to the late, great Angela Lansbury, legendary star of Murder, She Wrote and Beauty and the Beast, following her very sad death this evening. We'll be discussing her in our Greatest Britain and Union Jackass section. So lots to get through. But first, the headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you, and good evening to you. The King's coronation, as you've been hearing, will take place on the 6th of May next year. King Charles III will be crowned alongside Camilla, Queen Consort, according to Buckingham Palace. The coronation will take place at Westminster Abbey, 8 months after the death of Her Majesty the Queen. The date also marking the birthday of the King's grandson, Archie, who'll be celebrating turning 4 with his parents, Harry and Meghan. More than 2,000 specially invited guests will be seated inside the Abbey to witness the historic occasion, the first coronation in Britain for almost 70 years. In other news today, the Chancellor says he remains committed to measures he set out in his recent mini-budget, despite further intervention from the Bank of England today. The central bank was busy buying up more government bonds, having warned of additional risks to the UK's financial stability. Facing questions in the Commons, Kwasi Kwarteng described current support for households and businesses as strong, but he also refused calls from his own party to streamline spending on HS2 and Quangos and instead lower taxes for small businesses. The Prime Minister says G7 leaders will not waver in their resolve to help Ukraine achieve peace. The comment comes after President Volodymyr Zelensky joined Liz Truss and other heads of state to discuss the recent spate of Russian attacks on Ukraine. In a statement, the leaders condemned Moscow for targeting civilians and said it amounted to war crimes. President Zelensky is now calling for enough air defence capability to stop Russia.
The first point is defence support, an air shield for Ukraine. This is part of the security guarantees that are an element of our peace formula. When Ukraine receives a sufficient quantity of modern and effective air defence systems, the key element of Russia's terror, rocket strikes, will cease to work.
A British businessman has been arrested and charged with conspiring to violate sanctions imposed by the United States government on a Russian oligarch. The US Department of Justice says Graham Bonham Carter carried out more than £900,000 worth of illicit transactions to fund real estate properties for Oleg Deripaska's benefit. The Department of Justice in the States says they'll be seeking Mr. Bonham Carter's extradition. And as you've been hearing, the actress Angela Lansbury has died at the age of 96. She was perhaps best known for her long-running role as amateur sleuth Jessica Fletcher in Murder, She Wrote, and, of course, as the voice of Mrs. Potts in the animated movie Beauty and the Beast. Her family released a statement saying she died peacefully in her sleep at home in Los Angeles. She was just 5 days short of her 97th birthday. Angela Lansbury, who died today. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. Let's get back now to Mark Dolan, who's sitting in for Dan Wootton tonight.
Tomorrow's news tonight in our Media Buzz. Let's kick off with a first look at the front pages, hot off the press, and we'll start with the Eye. Truss bids to silence rebels with cap on energy profits. Liz Truss attempts to get Premiership back on track by capping profits made by electricity companies in a move aimed at saving taxpayers billions and averting calls for a windfall tax. Business Secretary Jacob Rees-Mogg says the move will cut bills because soaring wholesale gas prices will no longer dictate electricity prices, bringing the UK into line with much of the EU. Tory MPs tell Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng to soften radical tax-cutting plans or risk losing the Commons majority, as Chancellor faced bruising cross-examination from his own benches. OK, well, look, those are the stories dominating the front page of the Eye. I'll be speaking to one of the architects of Liz Truss's economic policy, John Longworth, in just a moment. The Sun now. Suspect attacked girl near Pryor days before Maddie taken. Madeleine McCann suspect Christian Bruckner has been charged with a sex attack on a girl just days before the daughter of Madeleine McCann, before Madeleine McCann was snatched. Of course, a tragic story there, and more revelations about her alleged attacker. Also, big showbiz news. I'm a celeb royalty. Tyndall in jungle. Rugby hero Mike Tyndall next month becomes the first royal to tackle the I'm a Celebrity jungle. The ex-England ace, mocked up on the right there in that photograph on the front page of The Sun, is the hubby of the Queen's granddaughter, Zara Phillips. Is there any place for royals in the jungle? We'll debate that shortly. Those are your front pages. We'll bring you more shortly. Reacting to all of the big stories of the day, author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, Conservative commentator and GB News star, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, and writer and journalist Rebecca Reid. Now, in a statement released today, Labour MP Sam Tarry said he was utterly crestfallen after he was deselected from his Ilford South constituency last night, before accusing his own party of a manufactured political circus. Tarry, originally pictured on the right, was sacked by Keir Starmer as Shadow Transport Minister in July after he defied the Labour leader's orders and joined striking rail workers on the picket lines. There he is on the right. The boyfriend of Deputy Leader Angela Rayner. His ousting marks the party's first deselection in over 10 years, and he also becomes the latest supporter of former leader Jeremy Corbyn to be ostracised from Starmer's New Look Labour. However, Sir Keir's culling isn't limited to the Corbynites, because earlier today he sacked his Chief of Staff and member of the Old Guard, Sam White. In a bold move, Starmer has set about restructuring his top political team ahead of the next general election, dismissing White, who had acted as a senior special advisor in the Blair and Brown governments. Latest YouGov polling has Labour with an enormous 30-point lead over the Tories, and in a call to party staff, Starmer claimed the government, quote, could fall at any time, and therefore it was essential to get on an election footing. He added, we're turning the page to the final act of opposition, driving the Labour Party into government. But the question remains, does Starmer have what it takes to be PM? And with over a year until the next scheduled election, frankly, it could be January 2025, might Labour be celebrating victory too soon? Calvin.
Yes. That 30-point lead makes me feel physically sick. I think Keir Starmer...
Seeing the graph is awful, isn't it, when you physically see it?
I think he most probably will be the next Prime Minister. Is he ready? No. This is not the Labour Party winning the next election. This is people voting against the Conservative Party. I wish they would vote for the smaller parties, like UKIP, for example. Why are people saying, I don't want what Conservatives give me, I'll go to Labour, who are going to give you the same stuff, but harder and longer? It makes no logical sense.
Indeed. So, in terms of Starmer, if he's this dynamic and decisive with his own party, perhaps that means he'd be
Starmer dynamic.
Well, he's rid.
Starmer
he's
dynamic.
Rid
Did
Labour.
you put those two words together?
I think it's an open secret. I'm no fan, but he has devil's advocate. He's rid the Labour Party of the ghost of anti-Semitism, hasn't he? And now he's just had a cull of lefty MPs on the Corbyn side, particularly this man who sort of picketed with the miners, with the striking rail workers.
Imagine a Labour MP getting dismissed for striking, for goodness sake.
No.
How far they've come.
Yeah, they
well,
have
they
indeed.
scent victory, don't they? They can smell it in the air.
Well, he's measuring curtains for number 10.
Well,
Is he wasting his money?
Speak to Carrie.
I hope so. There was an opinion poll the other day which gave 51% of the people polled thought that Starmer would be the next Prime Minister. In January, that figure was 28. 51%. It's the same, roughly speaking. 50% of people think that Liz Truss is doing a bad job.
However, Rebecca
the figures
Reed,
are terrifying.
Labour are streets ahead in the polls, but I don't know anyone, even Labour supporters, that like Keir Starmer.
I am that rare person who does like Keir Starmer. I am.
Is he dynamic?
The last couple of weeks, I'm starting to fancy him again. It's been a long time. Yeah, I originally
That's a worrying word.
He was my
that means it's happened twice.
He was my MP when I lived in Kentish Town, and I fancied him a lot then. And then
North London Liberal media elite.
I know. I've moved to South West London. I'm no longer a cliche. It's magical. Anyway, I am starting to have that tiny twinge of optimism again, as well as a crush on Keir Starmer, because I think there are a lot of people like me in this country who are left of centre, but not obsessed with who has a cervix and doesn't have a really short fringe and isn't fully vegan. And I think that they are starting to cater towards not the aggressive, loud momentum lot who are a small number of very cross people.
Misogynist bullies.
I wouldn't say that. I just think they have some good ideas, but they're not very practical. There are a lot of people like me who are just a sensible kind of lefty who would like a sort of Tony Blair-esque, though he doesn't have Tony Blair's then charm. Now we think maybe not charm. So I'm increasingly thinking that a lot of people might go, yeah, ready for a change. It's going to be a very, very, very hard. I just nearly said a word that sounds like election, but isn't election. It's going to be a very hard election.
Family show. We've all had a drink.
It will be a very, very, very hard election because it's been, 11 years of the Tories?
Got that sentence right. Well, yeah, that's a question. We were debating that earlier about whether there's sort of metal fatigue. But the issue is, and I mentioned it in my digest earlier, which is that the lead for Labour, I think, is a problem because now they're looking over their shoulder and the government have got 2 years, 2 years to think about having a Labour government and scrutinise their policies.
Yeah, and there's two things. First of all, it's hilarious. They're like, oh, do you know what we should think about doing? Getting ready for an election? It's like, guys, do you think maybe you should have been doing that for the last 2 years? Weird new thought. Maybe we might get into power. But yeah, it's come too soon. Really, you want that lead in a year's time. We've got it all to lose now, and you just know...
Well, because everybody must now start scrutinising Labour very, very carefully. And this is why, of course, people like, is it Sam Tarry, who have been deselected because he's just too dangerous. Goodness knows what Angela Rayner thinks about that. People like Angela Rayner have got to be kept under wraps and kept under control because if she comes out with her full-throated socialism, they're not going to...
But we tried to chuck her out of the shadow cabinet and wound up giving her a promotion.
Yeah.
All Starmer's got to do, I mean, he's very stolid. He's not dynamic at all. He's terribly stolid and dull. But he doesn't have to be anything else. He's just got to keep the lefties under control. He's detoxified the party. And he can be,
And it's a sort of softly catchy monkey approach. Just, we're not the Tories, and that's all you need to think about. And then when they get in, they can actually do things.
But is he a con man, Calvin? Is this guy a sort of socialist wolf in sheep's clothing? Is he far more left-wing than he's letting on?
He has changed his opinion on the monarchy. He's changed his opinion on the national anthem. He's changed his opinion on being a patriot. A lot of things have changed.
Get elected.
He's changed his opinion.
We all change our...
Calvin, he's changed his opinion on whether Jeremy Corbyn should be Prime Minister, for which he campaigned for 2 years.
And he started getting more decisive, which I quite admire, the way he dealt with the racist MP
Changing
Rupert
your
Huck
mind is a good thing. Calvin didn't used to like me, and now he loves me.
I've always loved you, Rebecca.
Yes, unlike Keir Starmer, you've got a legion of fans, Rebecca.
All he's got to do, he's got to keep his head down, not put a foot wrong. I say he's got to be Dr. Dolittle. And then it is the Tories to lose.
Well,
Christine is completely right.
He's hoping he's Dr. Do nothing. Also in Parliament today, the House of Lords Communications and Digital Committee had a very special visitor, an eloquent and informative speaker who gave some historic evidence to the committee. And Rebecca, we think you in particular will be very interested in this speech. Take a look at this. OK, we're just loading it up now. 10p in the meeting.
Lost my paintings by cameras in my eyes, my AI algorithms, and my robotic arm to paint on canvas, which result in visually appealing images. For my poetry, using neutral networks. This involves analysing a large corpus of text.
Is nobody else terrified by that?
Yeah, that's hell. That is hell on earth.
Honestly, if I could make one rule one rule, it would be that nobody's allowed to make any more robots at all. That is what's going to end us. It won't be global
You're very
warming.
nervous. Can I just say, though, much as I'm a fan, I think that this...
You're a fan of that?
Well, a better public speaker than Liz Truss.
Oh, I was just going to say...
yes.
Hang on, I was going to say how bad her speaking was. I could hardly hear her.
I mean, for a robot, she's quite good, Christine. She's, she's better than I want her to be.
She's better than a lot of MPs, so I'm horrified. You're not supposed to read your speeches in the House of Commons, but they do. They go like this.
There you go.
It's unbelievable.
You're absolutely right. Neil never made that mistake.
Of course
he was
not.
always a pro in the Commons.
I would go to prison for burning that thing.
Please do.
To the ground.
Do it. You'll have our full backing.
Metal.
Lots more to come. Really interested in this debate coming up. Following World Mental Health Day, has mental health become an industry and tantamount to a religion? Is it over the top? Is it too much now? Have we forgotten about stiff upper lip? Or are we right to put so much focus on our well-being? We'll discuss that with my brilliant superstar panel in the Media Buzz at 10:30. Mental health, are you over it? We'll discuss that. Plus, have the left got Trussonomics all wrong? Ex-Director General of the British Chambers of Commerce, John Longworth, explains why anti-austerity Liberals should get behind the PM's plan. That's next.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie's. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Deep austerity measures like spending cuts or a tax raid will need to happen to plug a £62 billion hole in the public finances, according to the Institute for Fiscal Studies. The think tank has warned that stabilising debt would require a whopping 14% fall in day-to-day spending on public services, and it's the equivalent of adding 9.5 pence to the base rate of income tax. The Chancellor's mini-budget has been heavily criticised for causing markets to crash, but today he defended his economic plan amid baying from the Labour benches and a vote of confidence from the IMF, who admitted that mini-budget, as I predicted, will promote economic growth.
No other government is sabotaging their own country's economic credibility as this government is. So, Mr. Speaker, can I ask, are the Chancellor and the Prime Minister the last people left on earth who actually think that their plan is working?
Yeah. And it's very clear where we stand on this. We've got pro-growth, pro-enterprise, pro-business Conservatives on one side and the anti-growth coalition on the other side, who want to tax more and want to commit us to low growth.
Whisper it, folks. That mini-budget is bearing fruit. Former MEP and current chairman of the Independent Business Network, John Longworth, believes Trussonomics, as it's being called, in its truest form, would actually be the opposite of austerity. As he writes for The Telegraph, if Trussonomics is all about growing the economy for the long term, thereby increasing prosperity and generating taxes to both pay down debt and support public services, by definition, it leaves no room for austerity. It strikes me, writes John, that the anti-austerity demonstrators outside the Tory conference in Birmingham this week ought, therefore, to be cheering on Liz Truss and her Chancellor. They ought to be voting Conservative. Well, John Longworth joins me now live in the studio. John, welcome to GB News.
Good to be here.
Let me ask you about this. The bottom line is that if you grow the economy, you make the cake bigger, the pie, choose your metaphor, you don't need austerity, you don't need massive spending cuts.
Well, it's pretty simple. The theory of Trussonomics is exactly that. And it's all about stimulating the supply side of the economy. It's about infrastructure investment. It's about cutting tax on business, stimulating growth, making Britain a great place to invest, an enterprise economy. We get growth. Growth generates taxes. The debt is paid down over a long period of time, just as it was after past wars, like World War I, for example.
And the debt is paid down and public services are funded through national income rather than borrowing, rather than living on the never-never.
Well, you have to borrow initially, and then the debt is paid down over a long period of time by increased tax receipts as the economy grows. And we all end up in a virtuous cycle. We all end up more prosperous. What's fascinating about the anti-growth coalition, all of whom have a spectrum of interests, vested interests, to be against this, is that it includes the Labour Party. The Labour Party actually promoting policies that would lead to austerity, to lead to cuts, rather than prosperity. And that's absolutely fascinating, because you'd think that they would want people to be well off and to have more tax receipts and to have a growing economy.
That's exactly right. It's counterintuitive, isn't it? It's the same argument around cutting the top rate tax. Now, admittedly, on paper, it doesn't look great that we're going to cut taxes for the richest during a cost of living crisis. It's the worst headline ever. But the reality is that if it attracts people to come to this country and spend their money here, invest here and pay their taxes here, then it's a net benefit to the country, not a loss.
Yes, it is. Nobody asked for the 45p cut. The Independent Business Network was surprised when it came.
Especially the timing, right?
It was bad timing.
Yeah, it didn't need to be announced until next year.
It didn't need to be announced until next year. We would have actually got that growth anyway. And what's interesting about what you were saying before is that there are several institutes, like the Institute of Fiscal Studies and the IMF, who are saying things now that the anti-growth coalition do not like. They are actually the lovies of those organisations normally. Interestingly, you mentioned the IFS saying that there will be a £60 billion hole. Well, actually, if you read to page 32 of their report, they then say, alternatively, if Trussonomics works, there'll be no hole in the budget finances at all. So, in fact, Trussonomics will fill that hole. Well, so even the IFS is saying this.
These think tanks, I mean, look, I'm a big fan of Paul Johnson, great admirer of his. The IFS is highly revered, but it's the same issue with the International Monetary Fund, which is they flip-flop. Because when the mini-budget was announced, the Institute for Fiscal Studies were completely in meltdown about the tax cuts, including the top-rate tax cut, which they said, who's paying for that? It's coming out of borrowing. When it was then cancelled, Paul Johnson went online. He tweeted that it's an insignificant amount of money. Well, it's a very small, either $2 billion a year or perhaps nothing, depending on whether it pays dividends. Similarly, we've seen the IFS complain about the tax cuts, and then in the same breath complaining that there are £20 billion worth of stealth taxes in this country.
Yes.
You can't have it both ways. The taxes are either too high or they're not.
Exactly. And there's a lot of doublespeak in all of this. Most of the measures that the government took in this mini-budget were actually trailed. They were understood to be happening. Reversal of tax increases that were already known that they may well do. The subsidy, of course, for people for energy for this winter and so on. And the 45p rate was a very small proportion of the overall package. Now, I know that there were people in traders in the city waiting for an excuse to short the pound. Right. There's a whole set of vested interests. There are lots of people out there who cannot abide the possibility that the UK outside the EU will be more successful than the EU. It would be disastrous for them because it might encourage other countries to leave as well. And then there are those people who own assets. Asset owners have done very well. The disparity between the rich and the poor has increased because of quantitative easing, because of low interest rates, because of low inflation. And actually, they don't want this to happen either because they want to continue with austerity. That suits them very well. There's a whole coalition of interests that actually don't want Trussonomics to succeed. But for sure, the Labour Party should not be one of them.
I think that this budget has been widely misunderstood in the markets, among commentators, and indeed even on the Tory backbenches. I think it will age well, but only time will tell. My viewers are worried about their interest rates, about the cost of debt, credit cards, the overdraft, hire purchase on a car, you name it. And they're just worried about the state of the economy next year. Yeah. So what do you think is going to happen to the economy? If Liz Truss sticks with her plan now, she's lost that top rate tax cut, but that's insignificant. If she sticks with the plan, what do you think is going to happen next year?
Well, my betting would be that we'll have a maximum central bank rate of about 3%. Inflation will settle back to about 5%, and we'll have north of 2% growth. In fact, it could be a lot further north than 2%.
Has that mini budget prevented a recession?
It may well have. Q4 is going to be touch and go, but next year will be much, much better. So we may well have avoided a recession. And what a lot of people don't realise is we're doing quite well. You know, we have the second lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7. We're actually outperforming all the G7 countries in terms of potential growth, according to the IMF itself. We have a lot going. We have the very lowest unemployment, especially among young people, in the whole of Europe. So what's not to like? But is that reported by the BBC, by a lot of newspapers? No, it isn't. And we've actually got a really strong future ahead of us, but we'll have a rocky few months.
So you think that because with other countries like America and Germany, America potentially going into recession has had, you know, 2 negative quarters of growth, which the president claims isn't a recession, even though that's been the metric of recessions for 5 decades in the West. Fine. But Germany looks certain to go into recession. That's deflationary, isn't it? That works against inflation. So a kind of global recession ought to bring prices down.
It ought to, because
of course the support for energy bills is going to chop inflation in half as well.
And yes, indeed, but there is something to be said about all of that, of course. I mean, the weakness of the pound is actually strength of the dollar because of interest rates there. They're driving their economy into the ground. Germany's a basket case, and the biggest...
What a sentence, by the way. Can I just... Wait a minute, can I just enjoy that one? Germany's a basket case. OK, carry on.
And the most important thing the UK government could do on the supply side right now is to stop subsidising green energy, because all of the costs and the supply problems relating to energy that have occurred this year as its root cause the subsidy of green energy, which is the most expensive route to net zero. And we have to actually get our heads around that.
My profound thanks to former MEP and chairman of the Independent Business Network, John Longworth. Your reaction, Dan at gbnews.uk. Coming up after John Cleese joins GB News as a presenter in pursuit of artistic freedom, I'll speak to trigonometry star Konstantin Kisin about why so many comedians feel there's no room for them in the mainstream. He's uncancelled at 10:40. But first, in the wake of World Mental Health Day, has mental health become an industry, tantamount to a religion? Is it over the top? Is it too much? Whatever happened to stiff upper lip? Or are we right to put so much focus on our well-being? A very important debate. We won't shy away from it in the media buzz with my panel. Plus more newspaper front pages after the break.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Cleese. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Let's return now to tomorrow's news tonight in our Media Buzz. And more front pages have been delivered. We've got the Daily Star. Let's take a look at what they're leading with. Fake astronaut tricks woman out of £27,000 to rescue him from space. I love you to the moon and back is the headline. An online scammer fleeced a love-struck woman by claiming to be an astronaut who needed £27,000 for landing fees for his rocket. There's one born every day, isn't there? Let's have a look now at the Metro. Alistair, have we got that? OK, lovely. National Gridiots. I do like that headline. Lights left blazing at Power HQ. You couldn't make it up. The National Grid has been accused of hypocrisy after every window of its HQ was seen lit up hours after most workers had gone home, including lights on the outside of the building. Also, trust me, I'm a nurse. Alleged baby killer Lucy Letby was interrupted by a worried mother whilst murdering her son on a neonatal ward, but fobbed her off by insisting, trust me, I'm a nurse. What a truly chilling story. Also, Coronation will be May the 6th. Brilliant stuff. Can't wait to celebrate King Charles next year, when hopefully the country is in a better place. I'm sure it will be. The Guardian next. Power giants to face windfall tax after all, as Truss delivers U-turn. Liz Truss, U-turn? Surely not. Renewable power companies will have revenues capped in England and Wales after the government bowed to pressure to curb runaway profits. The announcement earlier today provoked immediate accusations that Downing Street had performed another screeching U-turn. MPs call for menopause check at 45 for women. Millions of women in England should be invited for an NHS health check at the age of 45 to discuss the menopause, and HRT prescriptions should be free. This, according to the view of some MPs. Independent, Feed the Future. Join the Independents campaign to get free meals to more hungry children. And Number 10 orders review of tax cuts as warnings grow. Downing Street is wavering on the tax cuts outlined in Kwasi Kwarteng's mini-budget as pressure mounts from the markets and public criticism by the IMF. A Number 10 official reveals that staff are re-examining policies that he unveiled in the statement to see if even more U-turns might be required. Well, wait a minute. This is misrepresentation by The Independent, because the IMF have also said in the same breath that this mini-budget will likely prevent a recession and bring about economic growth next year that will see Britain at the very top of the G7. You're welcome. OK, we've got the Express now. Let's have a look at that. Always a good read. Scaled back ceremony on May the 6th as Charles is very aware of financial hardships. King demands coronation to reflect cost of living crisis. And Murder, She Wrote star Angela Lansbury sadly dies at the age of 96. A true big and small screen legend. The Daily Telegraph. Sterling falls as bank pulls plug on pension help. Fears of more chaos as Andrew Bailey, the governor, warns firms they have 3 days to get their funds in order. And Putin may defend Crimea with nuclear attack. Another chilling headline in relation to the Ukraine war. Daily Mirror, last but not least. Bulger mum's plea to PM, don't let James's killer walk free. Murderer could be released in days at parole hearing. And those are your front pages. Now, let's get more reaction to the big stories of the day with author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, Conservative commentator and GB News star, and I do mean star. He's got his own dressing room. He's got a wardrobe budget.
I thought we all did.
Makeup. No, it just says Calvin with a big star next to it. I just sort of bunk up with Nigel and Dan, to be honest with you. We're roommates.
Terrifying vision.
Absolutely. What a vision. That's where the boys hang out. And also we've got writer and journalist Rebecca Reid. Now, this week saw a global focus on mental health as corporations, celebrities and the media took part in Mental Health Awareness Day. The Prince and Princess of Wales, William and Kate, recorded a special programme on BBC Radio 1, which aired earlier today. Take a look or a listen.
One likes a toolbox, particularly for men. A toolbox is quite a useful analogy to kind of use. A lot of people don't realise what they need until it actually comes along. You can be living one life 1 minute and something massively changes and you realise you don't necessarily have the tools or the experience to be able to tackle that.
There's no right or wrong, that's the thing as well. Different things will work for different people.
So nice to hear Kate talking. I didn't know what she sounded like. England's football captain Harry Kane has also launched his foundation with the aim of changing perceptions around mental health. So with someone dying every 90 minutes from suicide in the UK, do these awareness campaigns and projects represent important progress? Or has mental health now become an industry and tantamount to a religion? Notwithstanding the serious mental conditions that many people suffer with, for which help, support and open conversation are so important, including from your GP, have we forgotten the British principles of stoicism and stiff upper lip? Just this week, the government launched a new mental health campaign called Every Mind Matters to help young Brits with what they call the Sunday scaries, what they call anticipatory anxiety before work on a Monday. But is dreading your 9 to 5 a sign of mental illness? Or are we at risk of taking focus away from people in need of significant and urgent support and undermining true mental health problems? Even Prince Harry, the man who has everything yesterday, made headlines by claiming that he needs emotional support dogs in his Montecito mansion, which has got 16 toilets. Give it a right royal flush, Harry. Are we simply failing to educate our kids that life is difficult and expectations, thanks to social media, are now too high? Given what previous generations have been through, do we, with our relatively comfortable and peaceful lives in the West, need to embrace stoicism? Is it time to bring back the stiff upper lip and grow a pair? Rebecca?
No. And also, seeking help and support for your mental health is not the opposite of stoicism. So I have generalised anxiety. I had very mild postnatal depression, and I've had OCD throughout my life since I was a child. None of those things mean that I don't have to try, that I don't have to go to work, that I don't have to clean my house, that I don't have to be a good parent. All it means is that I have to be very careful that I go to therapy regularly every week, that I make sure that I move my body every day, that I try to drink water regularly, eat a vegetable. I have to take better care of myself and I have to work hard to take good care of myself because my brain does not function perfectly, especially if I do what I really want to do, which is sleep all the time, smoke 20 Marlboro Lights a day and drink 9 bottles of wine a week.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you ever need company.
Yeah, it's a really fun weekend, but it also makes me a bit mad, so I have to do things I don't want to do.
Yeah,
and please let's not forget that the biggest killer of men under 45 in this country is suicide, and the people who are most likely to be stoical are men, particularly in that bracket.
So I hear what you're saying, and you've outlined some issues that you've faced and continue to face, over which you've, prevailed very successfully, which is a great, great achievement, great credit to you. But that would make you a candidate for mental health support. The question here is whether or not we're telling youngsters that, if they're just a bit blue one day, that somehow they need medication or they need counselling or that they've got mental health issues. The bottom line is that life is suffused with pain, difficulty, challenges. It's just, we've lived through 2 world wars. People have brought up kids, single-parent families. We've been through an awful lot of privation as a species, and you just wonder whether this generation are getting a bit soft.
I don't think it's that. I think it's that people suffered more before. When people came back from the Second World War with shell shock, they were genuinely destroyed from the inside out, and there was not enough support for that. I think we all agree that some people need mental health support. The question mark is what you expect people to be able to tolerate without any support. Personally, I don't think medication is often the answer. Usually, therapy, good nutrition, sunlight, moving your body, those things will do it.
Sure.
What's important is not to tell people, if you feel a bit sad, you can just give up, lie in bed, watch films, order Deliveroo and feel bad. That is not how you treat mental health. But you don't have to go softly, stroke your hair to say that mental health is real and people need help.
Christine, is it an industry, is it a cult now, a religion, mental health?
Yes, I mean, obviously everything that Rebecca has said is true, and some people have very serious mental health issues, and nobody underestimates that. But it has also become a cult industry. I mean, every celebrity, I've had all this trauma and I've got all this going on in my life, and people are encouraged. You mentioned social media. People are encouraged to sort of let it all hang out. I mean, Prince Harry needing support dogs. I mean, what? I mean, it's just absurd. He's one of the leading advocates of it. And there's barely a court case goes on where the barristers for the defence say, oh, he's got anxiety problems and he's got depression and he's got all sorts of mental health issues. It's just a way of trying to get people off. If you've got a villain you're representing, it's a very good wheeze. But I just think it's an excessive card to play, and too many people in the public eye play it, and an awful lot of youngsters seem to think that everybody has ups and downs in life. We all do. Everybody has ups and downs. Most days don't go by without people.
Life is difficult.
Life is very difficult indeed. Life is tough. Marriage is tough. Life is tough. Work is tough. Everything's tough. You have to deal with it. And I think it's become too easy for people just to say, oh, I need counselling and I have trauma and I have this, that and the other. And by the way, you haven't asked me if I'm OK this evening.
Yes, exactly. Well, no one ever asks you if you're
no,
OK.
I know.
And that's because you're the great British battle axe. You're the strong one, looking after Neil. But you've, and I mentioned earlier, you've had your ups and downs, and there was the bankruptcy, and you've lost your, you're worried you nearly lost the roof over your head.
We did.
Careers.
We did lose the roof over our head.
You rolled your sleeves up.
Yeah.
You became a comedy double act at the Edinburgh Festival. You became a big reality
Where we
star.
first met.
And now you've reached a crescendo. You're on the same TV network as Mark Dolan, John Cleese and Nigel Farage.
And Calvin.
And Dan Wootton.
Calvin and Rebecca.
Mr. Dan Wootton, Michelle Dewberry. I
mean, I don't want to be attacked for underestimating people who have serious mental health problems. Of course they do, but I think it is, in this day and age, it is too easy for people just to... It's a sort of catch-all excuse, sometimes for bad behaviour or not wanting to go to work.
Well, Calvin, I just worry about a generation of young people who have been told that they're victims, that we should feel sorry for them, that they've somehow got this cross to bear.
Yeah, of course. And of course we should be compassionate to people who genuinely have serious mental health problems. But the problem is now that everyone has a minor mental health problem. Everyone is self-diagnosing as having some kind of deficiency, as if there is... And Rebecca said it herself, I don't want to undermine what you said, but my brain's not perfect. None of our brains are perfect.
No, but I do have a minor mental health. I literally do.
I'm not saying you don't. I'm saying everyone does. This is the problem now, because it's become...
But we do.
But have we fetishising it?
We are, because it's become a social currency.
Why would I fetishise it?
I don't think you are, but I think some people on Twitter, they're announcing... I mean, I've seen celebrities tweeting that, hey, guys, just to let you know, I'm having a really tough day today. Yes. And we're supposed to applaud that. It's like, oh, well done you.
I'm battling my demons, I need help.
Applaud it. It's nobody's asking.
Why tweet about it? It's like a badge of honour, isn't it?
Why am I saying it here? Because it's true, it's relevant, it's what we're talking about.
But it's like intersectionality. It is the social currency, especially on social media. And I think it especially affects young men, because for so long we've been telling men that being an alpha male or being masculine is toxic, and actually they need to be more effeminate and more emotive and express your emotions. And so they've gone from one extreme to the other. Men can no longer be just men. Even saying man up nowadays is seen as a negative impact on someone's mental health. And I think men need sport, men need competition, men need to feel like the provider and to be the alpha male. These are all good things. And to be tough, and that should be okay.
But that's not a man-woman thing. People need to be resilient, people need to compete, people need to move their bodies. That's not a man thing. Women also need to do that. It's important.
But I mean, it
anyone.
ties in with the issue of race, or the critical race theory, which kind of casts anybody of colour as a victim. And you just wonder whether there's parallels.
Somehow.
There's parallels in the mental health
your race, your gender. Everyone has an aspect of themselves that they can claim victimhood mentality over. And because of the intersectionality period, we're all looking to climb that ladder and be the most victim, to get the most social currency, to get the most reward, to get the most clicks, likes, box or to get the most approval from our peers. That's what it's all about.
I'd love to be on that list, that hierarchy. I get cold sores. I don't know where that... Does that buy me any credit?
You're a comedian. That brings
I'll give you something for that.
I've got a slightly sore lower back. I don't know.
People overthink things. They overanalyze things.
Yes, Rebecca, last word.
I don't think any of this is a choice, but I think, again, they are not one or the other. It is not weak to want help. If you're taking responsibility for it, you're doing the right things, you're looking after your brain, you also have a right to acknowledge that sometimes it's difficult for you.
Well, that's it. Look, on this show, nothing's off limits, and actually I had a really heated and lively debate with my incredible team today, and we all agreed it's a complex issue. But the headline is, if you're going through a tough time, there's always someone to talk to. You can speak to a Samaritan's volunteer by calling them day or night on 116 123. The number is on your screen right now. There it is, 116 123. Coming up, we're going to pay tribute to the late, great Angela Lansbury as my panel nominate tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But first, in Uncancelled, trigonometry star Konstantin Kissin, who quit the comedy circuit after being silenced, spells out why John Cleese had to join GB News just to prevent the same thing happening to him. That's after we take a look at what's coming up in tomorrow's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight with me, Mark Dolan. As Nicola Sturgeon takes her case for independence to the Supreme Court, are we fighting hard enough to keep the union together? Scottish editor of the Daily Telegraph, Alan Cochrane, joins me live. Plus, is it wrong to brand J.K. Rowling a destroyer of women's rights? Olympian and activist Sharon Davies weighs in on the latest attack on the Harry Potter author. And there's opinion galore from Man of the People and Corrie actor Charlie Lawson, top columnist Rod Liddle, and my superstar panel, former Daily Star editor Dawn Neeson, entrepreneur and activist Adam Brooks, and broadcaster Ashley James. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on GB News.
It is time now for Uncancelled. Monday brought fantastic news. National treasure John Cleese is coming to Britain's news channel GB News. What a signing! Whether it's Monty Python, A Fish Called Wanda or Fawlty Towers, Cleese is a British cultural icon. But what does it say about the current state of free speech and politically correct comedy that this genius didn't feel able to ply his craft on a mainstream channel? Cleese pointed out that the BBC brought his interview to an abrupt end at the very moment of a cancel culture during a Radio 4 interview announcing his move yesterday.
I met one or two of the people concerned and had a dinner with them, and I liked them very much. And what they said was, people say it's a right-wing channel, it's a free speech channel. I mean, the BBC have not come to me and said, would you like to have some one-hour shows? And if they did, I would say, not on your Nelly, because I wouldn't get 5 minutes into the first show before I'd been cancelled or censored.
And let me just reiterate that interview was ended abruptly when he mentioned cancel culture. You couldn't make it up. Well, to discuss this, let's speak to one of my favourite comedians and a man who left the comedy circuit after getting sick of censorship to start his own highly successful channel, Trigonometry, which, of course, is a YouTube channel. It's a podcast, and Konstantin's written a brilliant book about this country as well. Konstantin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mark. I should correct you very briefly. I didn't quit the comedy industry because I was silenced. My comedy industry mainly got silenced by the pandemic. But anyway, carry on.
Although, I think you told me a while ago that you had enough of the circuit and the culture and the atmosphere on the circuit.
Yeah, I think those two things definitely came together. But I think by the time it became known that I was someone who believed in free speech, you know, walking into walking into green rooms and comedy clubs became a lot less enjoyable, let's say.
Yeah, too right. It is a shocking state of affairs that a genius like John Cleese is not able to appear on the BBC or Channel 4 or ITV for fear of censure.
Well, before we talk about that, Mark, have you not enjoyed the last couple of days? Because this is the thing that really gets me about wokies, is like, they're such bad losers. They can't take the loss, can they? And they have to go on Twitter and pretend, oh, John Cleese isn't funny. And you just go, what are you talking about? Just, you lost one. It's okay. Obviously, a man of John Cleese caliber coming to GB News, working, by the way, with Andrew Doyle, who, for my money, is one of the finest satirists this country's produced in my lifetime. Like, that's a powerful duo there. That is a coup for GB News. It happened. You lost one, guys. You've been winning on culture for 60 years. It's okay.
It's important, though, for these powerful figures to speak out, isn't it, Constantine, as you have done with Trigonometry, to use their platform to protect free speech and to protect creative freedom. So you've seen Ricky Gervais with arguably a deliberately offensive Netflix special just to sort of protect the boundaries of taste so that he can say the things you're not supposed to. We've seen that with the comedian Louis C.K., Dave Chappelle. It's important that these figures use the power they have to protect free speech.
I agree. And I think also one of the interesting things that seems to me at least to be happening is there's a positive alternative emerging. So I think we all spend quite a bit of time talking about the comedy industry heading in the wrong direction and things not being the way that we'd like them to be. But I think now you're starting to see, like I say, a few wins. You're starting to see a few really creative, talented people coming out and challenging some of these ideologies with art, by creating art, not by just talking about it as I do and Francis do in Trigonometry, but actually creating stuff. And that's very exciting.
Well, absolutely. Trigonometry is an amazing channel. So many videos. It's a podcast, but it's now a TV network, isn't it? And you are attracting viewers, as are GB News, away from the Beeb and Channel 4 and ITV.
Well, they're sort of handing them over, aren't they? Because, look, I used to write on the MASH Report, for example, one of BBC's flagship comedy programs. Well, it doesn't exist anymore because no one watches it. What about Mock the Week? I used to tune in religiously to Mock the Week. Every single time my wife and I would sit down and watch it. And then eventually over time, it just got diluted. It stopped being as good. They were more interested in ticking boxes than creating quality. And then you end up with viewers who don't feel that is the thing for them and they're going elsewhere. It makes sense.
Indeed so. And, it's interesting, isn't it? The generation of John Cleese, he has said that he would not be able to do the comedy he did in the 60s, 70s and 80s. He wouldn't be able to do that now. French and Saunders and Billy Connolly have said much the same thing.
Well, it's an open secret in comedy. Even the people who pretend there's no problem with, restrictiveness in censorship and self-censorship in comedy, even they secretly know that the rules are different, the rules are changing. Maybe they think it's a good thing, but the fact remains that, yes, the way that these things are now being enforced means that comedians are limiting themselves in a way that they've never done before.
Indeed. Listen, tell us about your new book. It's winning rave reviews.
An Immigrant's Love Letter to the West. It's a Sunday Times bestseller, and it's really all about why I think we should be aware of who we are, what we should be about in this country. And if in my opinion, it's only if we do that, frankly, the West will endure in the way that it has existed in the past, given some of the threats that we now face.
It's a cracking and important read, and hilarious as well, as it would be, because you are the author. You're also the co-creator of Trigonometry, which is available on YouTube and also via all podcast platforms. Your co-star is Francis Foster, and you're one of the great double acts. So do check it out, folks. Thank you, Constantine. We'll catch up with you very soon. It's time now for this. Yes, indeed, it's that point in the show where we reveal our greatest Britain and Union Jackass with Christine Hamilton, Calvin Robinson and Rebecca Reed. It's the heroes and villains of the day. So, Christine, who's caught your eye for a lot of praise today?
Well, I didn't know you were going to do that last item, but it is, of course, John Cleese. I think GB viewers need no explanation as to why I put him forward as my greatest Briton.
Indeed, a true comic genius and a cultural icon. How about you, Calvin? Who's your greatest Briton?
West Yorkshire Police for charging a 24th person with the rape of 13-year-old girl in Bradford. 23 other men have appeared in court for the same victim last month.
Yeah, justice for what is a truly evil and appalling crime. Rebecca, who's caught your eye this week?
Very sadly, Angela Lansbury, who has left us. She died aged 96, same as the Queen, and I think will be remembered for a lot of things. For me, it's the fact that she did a lot of great work for older women on TV. Also, Murder, She Wrote, Beauty and the Beast.
Absolutely loved Murder, She Wrote. She'd go on holiday with her nephew and there was always a dead body. She never got any investigations around her behaviour. What a legend. What an incredible icon of the small and big screen. She would be my choice. There you go. My nomination My decision, the judge's decision, is final. Dame Angela Lansbury is our greatest Briton. A total legend. I love that woman. OK, Christine, your Union Jackass, please. Who's grinding your gears this week?
Is Labour MP Tom Watson, who Keir Starmer has nominated for the House of Lords. This man has disgracefully given unparalleled credence to the words of an absolute liar during Operation Midland. He actually accused Leon Briton of being evil. I haven't got time to expand more, but Tom Watson MP...
A shocking miscarriage of justice, and you're absolutely right. Christine, Calvin, your Jackass?
Janine Small, the Pfizer executive who has gone on record as saying that they didn't actually ever test for transmission rates of the Pfizer vaccine, therefore rendering vaccine passports and vaccine mandates utterly useless, unethical and illegal.
Absolutely. A day of reckoning is coming. I can't wait. Bring popcorn. And last but not least, Rebecca, your Jackass.
At the University of Arts London, who told a woman that she couldn't breastfeed her 2-month-old baby in a cafe on campus.
Brilliant. Well, all fantastic nominees, I've got to say. I'm going to make it a dead heat. There you go. I'm back tomorrow from 9. Thanks to the team for a brilliant 2 hours. And thanks for your company as well. Headliners are next.